Why legends don't compete, how categories make companies, and why your category is your single point of failure. All right. Hey ho, let's go. Welcome to this episode of Legends and Losers Unlocked, where we try to unlock, unpack, break down, and break out, and and who knows what. An important topic, either a news topic or something going on in business. And today, what we want to look at is why your category is your single point of failure. And so, the first thing I would share with you is that most people in business today, whether they realize it or not, they make an unconscious, unquestioned choice. And that choice is to position themselves and or their company in a large existing market. They attack that market with what you could think of as a better strategy, and what they're going for is market share. So most executives, most entrepreneurs do not question that they are going to attack a large and existing market, that they have a better strategy than the competition in that market, and that what they're up to is market share. Now, you might be listening to that and going, well, kind of no shit, Sherlock. Isn't that what business is about? Well, it turns out when you study what the legends did in business, this is exactly not what they did. It's 180 degrees away from what they did. So, what's the first thing we know? Existing market categories are for losers. Yep, that's right. Existing market categories are for losers. Now, let's talk about why. So, for our book, Play Bigger, we analyzed every venture-backed technology company founded in the United States from 2000 through to the end of 2015. And we decided to study a number of things, but one of them in particular was what percentage of total value created in any given market category goes to the leader or the category king. And it turns out that number is 76%. Now, that's in tech, but what more and more people tell us in more and more industries is that we are increasingly in a winner-take-all situation in business today. And we know for sure we are in tech. And I believe that even if that's not the dynamic in your market category today, playing like it's not going to be the dynamic in your market category soon is a mistake. And so the first thing is one company gets 2/3 of the economics. Now, you might say, well, that's in the startup space. I'm, not a startup. I'm not an entrepreneurial company. I'm a Fortune 500 company. I'm a larger company. Well, it turns out there's a pretty significant economic power that goes to the category king, and there's ramifications of not being the category king. So my buddy Eddie Yoon, who arguably is the number one category design kind of guru or coach, if you will, to the Fortune 100 and Fortune 500. He's also the author of a great book I recommend called Super Consumers. And Eddie's done a bunch of writing for the Harvard Business Review. One of his articles is a landmark, I think. It's called Why It Pays to Be a Category Creator. And in that article, he writes that, quote, 53% of incremental revenue growth and 74% of incremental market capitalization goes to companies who are creating and designing new categories. So about half the revenue growth in the space and about, surprise, surprise, 2/3 of the market cap goes to companies who are creating or designing new markets and categories. So what does all that tell us? Category kings rule. They take 2/3 of the economics, and trying to defeat an embedded or entrenched, if you will, category king is almost always suicide. So let's talk about the three kinds of category disasters that can affect a company. The first one, now this applies to you whether you're a giant Fortune 500 or a brand new startup. When you're launching a new product, company, service, brand, however you're thinking about it, and when you launch it, if you launch it into no category and you're trying to create one, and no category develops, that's the kind of biggest disaster you could think of. So a simple example of this in my mind, if you remember when Dean Kamen, the legendary entrepreneur, launched the Segway, his intention was that this Segway, this sort of human mover thing. I don't know what you'd call it. Haha. That is to say, there's no real category name for it that I'm aware of. When he launched that thing, he launched it with a lot of fanfare, saying he was going to transform the way cities work and transportation works, and he was going to get rid of congestion because all these people were going to be driving around on these segways, going to help with the environment, etc. Well, because Dean failed to do any category design, that is to say, the category didn't take off, the company essentially failed. Now, over time, it ended up in a niche, which is mall cops and tourists, but very far from the giant, life-changing, world-changing category that the founders imagined. So the first category disaster is you launch something and no new category emerges. The second category disaster is the category does take off, but it turns out to be shitty with very little growth. And often I hear things like companies saying, well, we need to figure out a way to be more of an aspirin and less of a vitamin. And what they're really saying when they say that is our category kind of sucks. That is to say, we're not experiencing any pull from the market. And when there's no pull and there's a number of companies competing, what you end up with is essentially a race to the bottom. And nobody likes that. And then the third category disaster is when the category takes off, and for a number of reasons, our company is unable to execute, or that is to say, we lose to the emerging category king. And I have had this experience a number of times in my life, and nothing to me has hurt more than losing a category battle in a giant existing category, because you knew you could have had it all, and yet you didn't. And so that makes me kind of crazy. So what are the ahas? Categories make companies, categories can be designed, and categories can be redesigned. Now, in spite of this aha, many of the greatest category kings in the world seem to forget what makes them category kings. So for example, Google wins the category battle in search because they get problem and solution and therefore category design right. When they then go to compete against, and they don't make the mistake, by the way, back in the old days of trying to compete against Yahoo and Excite and all the other search engines that were out there at the time. They do their own thing, and they essentially redesign the rules in the category. They don't do that, however, when they attack Microsoft in the office productivity or the personal productivity market. Office, which includes Word, PowerPoint, Excel, etc. And so they put out this product called Google Docs. And this time, rather than evangelizing a problem and a solution and why that's different, they just launch a Me Too product, and they launch they compete, if you will, and they compete with a we're better than them strategy. Well, not only have they failed, but Microsoft's $12 billion business with Microsoft Office and 90+% market share has been untouched. And so isn't it interesting that you have this legendary company that has this legendary brand in one category, but not in this case, the other productivity suite space. And so what that's telling us is that categories make brands, categories make companies. The reason Google is a legendary brand is because they're the category king in a legendary category, search. When they enter new categories, unless they're designing a new one or redesigning an existing one, they fail. So when they compete head on against Microsoft in this case, they fail. And so what that's telling us, I think, is that legends do not compete. They design or redesign categories, and they don't rely on their product to differentiate them. Now, I'm not saying they don't have differentiated products. They do, and having a legendary product really matters. But category designers teach the world to think in a very particular way. They don't want to be compared to what came before. They want their own market category, which they can dominate. So they don't want to be compared to anything else. They want everything that comes after them to be compared to them. And so as a result, category designers don't market products. They don't fall into this trap of having a feature war. They market problems. And when the world sees the problem in the same way that you do, pow, a whole new market category opens up. So for example, if you look at Amazon and you break down, well, why were they successful with AWS, but they failed with the Fire, their smartphone? Well, in the case of Amazon Web Services, AWS, they were creating, or if you will, designing a new market category. And they evangelized a problem that software developers had, which is building your own data center is very hard and very expensive. Why do that when you can be easy up and on, plug into Amazon's infrastructure, and bang, pay as you go? And once the market, that is to say the category, understood that problem and how Amazon in this case was solving it, pow, they stopped buying servers, they stopped buying data center capabilities, and they just plugged into AWS, and the rest is history. Now, when Amazon went to do the Amazon Fire, they didn't do any of that. All they did was market a product. They did not explain to the world why the Fire was different. And in particular, they didn't market a unique problem that the world cared about. They had a features discussion, and as a result, you and I and the rest of the world kept buying iPhones and Android phones, and they ended up failing with the Fire. So category designers market problems, not products, to design new categories. Legends don't compete. They design new categories where they can stand alone. That's it for this issue of Legends and Losers episode unlocked. Have a great day, my legendary friends, and apologies to Bill McDermott, CEO of SAP. Sorry, Bill, we just ran out of time for you.